Behind reinforced steel and tradition, a royal vault had been sealed for years, untouched since the Queen's passing. But when Princess Anne was granted access under obscure circumstances, what she found wasn't treasure, it was truth. A document buried by time, a hidden will, and a revelation about Camilla that could upend everything. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began not with a grand gesture, but with a footnote and administrative entry buried in the weekly agenda of Windsor's archival department. Princess Anne had been granted conditional access to a sealed portion of the Queen's private vault, one few within the royal circle even acknowledged existed. The vault itself, reportedly tucked behind a false panel within Windsor Castle, was said to contain personal correspondences, draft proclamations, and unfinished thoughts, items not deemed fit for record, yet far too significant to destroy. For decades, it had remained silent, invisible under layers of protocol. But now, for reasons known only to a select few, King Charles had quietly authorized Anne's entry. Those closest to the late Queen had long whispered that Anne was not just her daughter, but her most trusted executor of truth. Throughout turbulent decades, Anne had been the quiet sentinel of the Crown's inner workings, immune to scandal and disinterested in pageantry. She had earned her place not through headlines, but through consistency. And perhaps that's why she alone was deemed worthy to open what others feared. Inside, among neatly preserved leather-bound volumes and ivory-sealed folders, was an envelope, not typed, not printed, but handwritten her mother's unmistakable penmanship, the same seen on Christmas cards and wartime speeches. The envelope bore no date, only Anne's name, and a seal marked with the Queen's personal crest. What Anne read inside, she never repeated in full. But those close to her say her face changed as she scanned the pages, first tight, then pale. The Queen's words, scrawled with unmistakable finality, made reference to corrections to history and noted, "A narrative I can no longer leave unanswered." It directly mentioned Camilla, not in condemnation, but in complexity. It spoke of rushed decisions, pressures from within, and a desire that the record reflect what was, not simply what became. Most shockingly, the directives outlined within this private will seemed to contradict the official version read to the public after Her Majesty's death. This was not a ceremonial document. It was personal. It was surgical. And it had been kept hidden until now. Anne left the vault without speaking to staff, carrying the letter in a sealed pouch. She made no immediate calls. There was no summons, only silence. And yet, within 24 hours, a closed-door meeting was held at Balmoral. Invitations were sent not through aides, but personally delivered. Something had shifted, something irreversible. But unlocking the vault was only the beginning. The contents would ignite a royal reckoning long in the making. It wasn't just a legal will, it was a confession. A handwritten letter from Elizabeth II herself addressed to her daughter and sealed with the royal crest. In it, the Queen poured out truths about Camilla, legacy, and regret. Truths that were never meant to surface. The letter bore a date that startled even the most seasoned palace insiders. Written just weeks before the Queen's final public appearance, it revealed a sovereign not only confronting her own mortality, but re-evaluating the legacy she'd leave behind. In lines both meticulous and trembling, Elizabeth recounted her inner conflict over Camilla's ascension. She did not speak in condemnation, nor did she retract her formal decisions. But the tone, raw, unfiltered, spoke volumes. She admitted the compromise had cost more than she let on. The phrase "errors in haste" appeared multiple times. The Queen, once thought unshakable in her judgment, confessed that public duty and personal clarity did not always align, that in the effort to preserve the Crown's appearance of unity, she had silenced her private doubts. What gripped Anne most, however, was not the regret, it was the charge. The Queen referred to her daughter as the guardian of truth, and wrote that Anne's legacy would not be one of titles or headlines, but of integrity. "You have always been the steady hand," she wrote, "and that is what this family will need when the waters rise. It was a private coronation of sorts, not of power, but of purpose. Elizabeth did not explicitly call for Camilla's title to be reconsidered, but in phrasing both careful and conspicuous, she raised the issue of legacy realignment, noting, "Not all things endure simply because they are announced." Those close to Anne said she read the letter more than once. Her hands trembled. Her expression, usually unreadable, cracked. For decades, Anne had been the unwavering soldier of the monarchy, duty-bound, reserved, and never known to question protocol. But this letter, written in the Queen's own hand, reframed everything. It suggested that even the monarch had been pressured, cornered by time, and burdened by the need to maintain royal optics. It painted a picture of Camilla's rise as something managed, not fully embraced, and it placed on Anne a responsibility she never asked for but could no longer ignore. The letter, still unpublished in full, remains locked in a secured cabinet accessible only to Anne and the King, yet even without public disclosure, the tremors began. Whispers moved through the corridors like drafts. Meetings were delayed. Statements that were once confidently drafted were suddenly paused. Those who had once assumed Camilla's position was untouchable began to hesitate, if only slightly, because Anne, the one royal who never played politics, now held something more powerful than a decree. She held her mother's words. And while Anne absorbed her mother's hidden words, elsewhere in the palace, Camilla began to feel the chill of whispers she couldn't control. Before the public ever knew, the ripple had already reached Camilla. Private meetings, cancelled appearances, a furious Charles behind locked doors. What had begun as a whisper was now a storm brewing beneath the surface, and the Queen Consort was at its centre. Anne didn't make a scene. She didn't call a summit or consult aides. She walked into the King's private study, letter in hand, and said what needed to be said. Charles, already stretched thin by the weight of the crown, listened in silence. When she finished, there was a pause so long it swallowed the room. Then came his reply, stony, curt, and chilling in its clarity. He ordered the vault sealed again, indefinitely, and called for a legal review of every document removed. Whatever had been uncovered, it would not be allowed to spiral beyond their control, or so he believed. Camilla, already informed by whispers rather than fact, reacted with sudden withdrawal. A scheduled appearance at a children's charity was abruptly cancelled with no official explanation. The press spun it as fatigue. Insiders knew better. Staff close to Clarence's house reported a heated exchange behind closed doors, Camilla demanding answers, Charles offering little beyond controlled frustration. No raised voices, but the tone was unmistakable. A line had been crossed, and neither knew how to walk it back. The palace machinery, usually seamless, began to creak. Coordination between Clarence's house and Princess Anne's office slowed to a crawl. Emails went unanswered. Schedules became vague. What had once been a show of united front was now paper-thin, masking growing division. And at the heart of it all stood a single envelope written by the late Queen, carried by her daughter, and now threatening to dismantle years of carefully managed public image. Behind the scenes, talk grew darker. Aides overheard Camilla insisting that the letter must never see light. Rumours swirled that she had formally requested the document be sealed under a protective royal clause, a move that would bury it indefinitely. But it was already too late. In the brief hours it had been handled, fragments of the Queen's words had been seen, not scanned, not published, but memorized, copied by hand, and leaked in whispers. But it was too late for secrets, because fragments of the Queen's will had already been copied and leaked. One royal aide, one anonymous leak, and the entire monarchy was thrown into crisis. Select phrases from the Queen's hidden letter appeared in international media, and what they implied about Camilla's place in history sent shockwaves through the nation. It began with a whisper in the press, a single column buried in the Sunday edition of a national broadsheet. Then, before the palace could respond, it spread like wildfire. Under the bold headline, "The Queen's Final Confession," a respected journalist published several lines, reportedly taken directly from the late monarch's sealed letter. Among them, a chilling phrase, History must not be rewritten to suit comfort. The message was unmistakable, and the subtext was even louder. Camilla's rise was not endorsed without regret. Another excerpt read, "The world mourned Diana, but I feared we buried more than a princess, we buried truth," sending a jolt through the public consciousness. It was the first time Elizabeth II's private voice, unscripted and raw, had spoken with such haunting clarity, and the people listened. The palace scrambled for damage control, but it was already too late. What followed was a firestorm of commentary, speculation, and moral reckoning. Across social media and television panels, the question was no longer whether Camilla should hold the title of Queen Consort. It was whether she ever truly deserved it. The leaked passages directly contrasted Camilla's current role with Diana's legacy, framing it not as a seamless transition, but as a contested replacement. The Queen's words painted a portrait of someone hemmed in by duty, pressured by perception, and ultimately silenced by the machinery around her. Cornered by perception and silence, she had written, leaving readers wondering just how much the crown had hidden from them. Amid the uproar, one name surfaced again and again in whispers: Anne. Though never officially connected to the leak, insiders pointed to someone within her tightly held circle as the likely source. Whether it was a deliberate act of legacy protection or an emotional cry for truth, no one could say for sure. But the timing was too sharp, the access too direct, and while Anne remained publicly silent, the suspicion spoke volumes. With the monarchy reeling and headlines multiplying by the hour, public demand surged for the full publication of the Queen's letter. Petitions were launched, think pieces poured in, and the pressure mounted on King Charles. He responded in the only way the institution knows how, internally and ruthlessly. An official investigation was ordered, led by palace legal advisors, to uncover who had breached the vault of royal confidentiality. But even as inquiries began, the damage was done. The Queen's voice had broken through the grave, and with it came echoes no crown could silence. But the investigation only stirred more questions because the Queen's hidden will wasn't the only document in that vault. Tucked beneath the Queen's sealed documents was another envelope, unmarked, unsigned, but unmistakable. Inside was a single page, typewritten and dated. A legacy addendum, drafted shortly after Diana's death. And once again, Camilla's name stood in contrast to a ghost that never faded. The page was clinical in tone, but heavy with consequence. Dated in 1998, barely a year after Diana's tragic death, the document bore the fingerprints of a monarch caught between mourning and duty. While not bearing an official crest or signature, it was logged in the Queen's legal files and believed to have been dictated to one of her most trusted advisors during a period of deep national unrest. In it, Elizabeth II did not speak of grief in emotional terms, she framed it as a constitutional matter. The world had not only lost a princess, it had lost its symbol of moral clarity. Diana, in death, had become more than royal. She had become untouchable. The addendum laid out, with striking precision, a set of philosophical boundaries for how the monarchy was to proceed in the aftermath. It referenced the need to maintain Diana's humanitarian legacy uncontested, warning against any future actions that could be interpreted as rewriting public memory. The words were calculated but powerful, an institutional acknowledgement that perception had become just as vital as protocol. And though Camilla was never named directly in those initial paragraphs, the implication of her presence loomed behind every phrase. Further down, the document became more pointed. It called for any formal title or public role granted to individuals previously associated with royal scandal to be delayed indefinitely. The phrasing was tactful, but the meaning was not lost. It advocated for soft integration, suggesting behind-the-scenes support over high-profile coronations. In short, it was a roadmap to avoid backlash, a quiet strategy to preserve the crown's image without inviting confrontation. But what made this single page explosive wasn't just what it said, it was how clearly it contradicted the reality that now existed. Because in 2026, Camilla was not behind the scenes. She was Queen Consort, front and center. She had been crowned in full view of the world, standing in a place the 1998 document explicitly sought to protect. And that conflict between the addendum's cautious instructions and the present-day throne spoke to a rupture inside the institution itself. Whether the directives were ignored, revised, or buried remained unclear, but one thing was certain. Someone had known about this page and chosen not to honor it. For Princess Anne, the discovery was a reckoning. With the Queen's handwritten letter still echoing in her mind, this second document added weight to a truth she could no longer ignore. The monarchy hadn't simply evolved, it had veered off a path that her mother, in her quietest moments, tried to set. And as Anne sat with the weight of two legacies colliding, she made a decision that would split the royal household down the middle. It was the moment no one inside the palace expected. Princess Anne, ever loyal, ever reserved, stood before the king and delivered a message that shattered protocol. Her loyalty wasn't in question, but her silence? That was over. The private meeting between Anne and Charles was never officially acknowledged, but those closest to the throne knew something seismic had occurred. It was described as tense, restrained, and final, the kind of confrontation where no one raises their voice, but the weight of every word feels like a blade slicing through years of suppressed truth. Anne did not plead. She did not accuse. She simply demanded clarity on Camilla's role, on the legacy their mother left behind, and on why those final wishes had been buried in a vault that was never meant to see daylight again. Her voice carried not outrage, but conviction. The kind of conviction that only comes from someone who's been silent for too long. She refused to support the upcoming royal event that sought to elevate Camilla as a pillar of legacy. The phrase alone was enough to make Anne recoil. Legacy wasn't a press release or a speech drafted by aides. It was built in silence, held through pain, and most importantly, honored when no one was watching. She told Charles that if he moved forward without addressing the truth, she would withdraw from all joint public appearances, not out of rebellion, but out of principle. A line had been crossed, and she would not stand beside that line and smile for the cameras. Charles, blindsided, attempted to defend the monarchy's image. He spoke of modernity, of progress, of healing, but Anne, unmoved, reminded him of something deeper. Legacy, she said, is not a brand, it's a promise. A promise their mother made to the people, to the crown, and to the memory of a woman who once redefined what it meant to be royal. Camilla's ascension, regardless of intent, now stood in direct conflict with that promise, and Anne could no longer pretend otherwise. By the end of their conversation, no resolution had been reached, but the atmosphere inside Buckingham had changed. There was now a quiet fracture running through its halls, a cold war between siblings, not over power, but over truth. For the first time in decades, the unity of the monarchy was not just questioned, it was cracked, and that crack wasn't hidden from the outside world. Whispers had already begun to leak. The public didn't have all the details, but they sensed something was wrong, and they were beginning to choose sides. With the inner circle fracturing, the public's response became the real battlefield, and they were choosing sides quickly. Old wounds reopened. Diana's name trended globally. Protesters stood outside royal residences with candles and photographs, and the question, once buried under time, rose again. Had the Queen Consort ever truly earned her crown? The digital age knows no silence. Within hours of the leak, social media ignited like wildfire. Hashtags flooded every platform: number Diana's will, number Vault Truth, number Camilla questioned. The quiet storm within the palace had turned into a public reckoning, and suddenly, every clipped word and every hidden phrase from the Queen's documents was being dissected by millions. Diana's interviews, archived and long thought, buried in the tide of modern monarchy, resurfaced with a vengeance. Snippets of her raw emotion, her pain, her warnings were replayed again and again. Across continents, a haunting refrain echoed. Had the public ever truly healed from her death, or had they simply been told to move on? The debate took on a life of its own. Talk shows, forums, podcasts, every outlet became a battlefield between those defending the crown's evolution and those who now questioned if history had been rewritten for convenience. The divide was generational, emotional, and personal. Younger voices, those who had grown up hearing the echoes of Diana rather than witnessing her firsthand, were some of the loudest. They sided with Anne, with preservation, with truth. They didn't want a sanitized version of the past. They wanted accountability in the present. Petitions began circulating with alarming speed. Demands for the full release of the Queen's hidden will surged past 1 million signatures in less than 48 hours. Public trust wavered, and Camilla's approval ratings, already tenuous, collapsed under the weight of renewed scrutiny. What had once been seen as cautious acceptance was now viewed by many as a coronation built on silence and strategy. Every past controversy, every carefully curated statement, was dragged back into the light. And as the storm swelled, royal commentators, those once fiercely protective of the monarchy's image, began to question what many had avoided for years. Could Camilla's title survive this moment? Would history now have the final word? The palace, already splintered from within, now faced a crisis without precedent. For every carefully worded statement, there were 10,000 tweets dismantling it. The Queen's private thoughts had become public currency, and no amount of tradition could put the genie back in the bottle. Anne's confrontation had sparked a reckoning, but it was the people who turned it into a movement. And as the pressure mounted, the only person who hadn't spoken finally broke her silence. In a carefully worded appearance, Camilla stepped into the storm. She smiled. She thanked. But beneath the rehearsed words, the silence around the Queen's letter was deafening, and everyone noticed. The event was meant to be unremarkable, a routine charity appearance scheduled weeks before the storm erupted. But now, the room was loaded with tension, and the weight of expectation hung in the air like fog. Cameras clicked, flashes lit the stage, and all eyes turned to the woman who had become the center of a royal reckoning. Camilla took the podium with her usual composure, voice steady, posture regal. But to the trained ear, to those watching for cracks in the image, something had changed. The tone wasn't celebratory, it was measured, controlled, scripted. There was no mention of Queen Elizabeth, no nod to Anne, and most notably, not a single word about the letter that had thrown the monarchy into chaos. In a moment when the world demanded answers, Camilla offered only restraint. Observers dissected every pause, every inflection. She thanked the charity's volunteers. She acknowledged the tireless work of the organizers. She smiled, gracious and polished, but her words stayed in safe territory, never once veering into the explosive reality outside those walls. Behind the cameras, analysts went to work. Lip readers, body language experts, former palace aides, all weighing in. Her eyes, they said, lacked their usual spark. Her hands, too still. Her voice, tight in places it never had been before. The Queen Consort, once commanding, was now cautious. A portrait of control at a time when control was slipping fast. The silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. Across social media, the response was immediate and unforgiving. Not even a single word about Diana. One post read, echoing a sentiment that swept across timelines and broadcasts. Her refusal to address the letter was taken not as dignity, but deflection. And if Camilla had hoped that quiet strength would carry her through the storm, it backfired. The public viewed it as a calculated silence. A silence that, in their eyes, only confirmed what they feared. That the Queen's wishes had been cast aside. That Camilla had climbed too far, too fast, on ground that was never truly hers to stand on. But it wasn't just what Camilla didn't say it was who wasn't standing beside her. Princess Anne's absence from the event spoke volumes. A schedule conflict, the palace claimed. But the press and public weren't buying it. Anne had always stood for duty, for appearances, for the crown. Her absence, in this moment, felt deliberate, symbolic, and the message was unmistakable. Not all royals were willing to lend their presence to an image they no longer supported. Behind the scenes, tension gripped the palace. Advisors scrambled, aides whispered of contingency plans. The royal family, battered by headlines and haunted by legacies, now stared down a precipice with no clear way forward. And just when the monarchy braced for collapse, one final twist reshaped the ending entirely. In a stunning move of defiance and grace, Princess Anne released the one thing no one could spin. No one could silence a recorded message from Queen Elizabeth herself. Her voice, steady and deliberate, told the world exactly how she wanted her legacy remembered. For weeks, speculation had drowned the palace halls in whispers and headlines. The Queen's hidden will had already shattered illusions. But nothing compared to what came next. Anne, silent through the chaos, had held something close to her chest, a secret more intimate than any document, more undeniable than any leak. It was a voice, the voice of the Queen, not as monarch, not as symbol, but as mother, as matriarch, as witness to the deep fractures rippling through her lineage. The recording, dated just months before her passing, had been entrusted to Anne alone. Its contents were never meant for public spectacle, but when silence became complicity, Anne made her choice. In the quiet halls of Balmoral, during a memorial marked by simplicity and sincerity, she pressed play. The Queen's voice, aged but unshaken, filled the room. She began not with rulings or decrees, but with thanks. Gratitude for the family that had carried her through storms. Gratitude for Anne, for her unwavering loyalty. And then, subtly, came the warning. "There will be decisions made in my name," she said. "And I hope they are not distorted by the desire to rewrite what the public has not forgotten." It was not accusatory, it was not aggressive, but it was clear. The Queen, ever measured, was drawing lines between legacy and reinvention, between truth and the temptation to silence it. There was no direct mention of Camilla. No need. The Queen spoke instead of Diana, of how the world changed when her light entered it, of how public trust must never be treated as inheritance, it had to be earned, again and again. Her words were a gentle rebuke to a palace that had moved too quickly, glossed too much, and underestimated the memory of millions. In just under 7 minutes, the Queen had done what weeks of speculation could not. She restored clarity. Not through scandal, but through sincerity. Not with outrage, but with purpose. The public's reaction was immediate and emotional. Across social media, the message went viral, accompanied by photos of the Queen through every decade of her reign. Hashtags flooded the digital sphere. Number her voice, number the real legacy, number Elizabeth speaks. People wept, not because of scandal, but because they heard in her voice a reminder of what the monarchy once stood for: duty, truth, sacrifice. Anne's decision to release the recording wasn't just bold, it was unifying. It gave the nation something to believe in again, a compass. As for Camilla, her place was no longer unchallenged. She remained, yes. Her role, once armored by silence and ceremony, now faced something far more powerful: public conscience. The message from the Queen didn't remove her, but it did something deeper. It made the question of worth impossible to ignore. From palace officials to the British people, the tone shifted from passive acceptance to active reflection. The future of the monarchy would not be inherited without scrutiny. Not anymore. And so, from behind steel doors and sealed envelopes, a hidden truth reshaped the future of the crown. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.